I give autism acceptance presentations to schools and other groups. I also present my book to them. One of my absolute favorite things that happens is during the conversation, I'll usually have 2 or 3 students, totally unprompted, raise their hand excitedly and be like, oh, that's me, I'm autistic, in front of all of their classmates. They are proud to be autistic and to declare that in front of everybody. They'll be like, oh, I have headphones too, like the character in your book. Oh, and I hate the sound of the lights in here. That drives me crazy, just like you said. And you know my least favorite smell that totally drives me crazy is the smell of the pencil sharpener. Oh, every time I have to cover my nose, and it like really stresses me out. And then these neurotypical kids get to hear straight from the autistic kids what their life experience is like. And the messages that I get from the parents of these autistic kids when they come home and are so excited to tell their parents that they got to talk all about their neurodiverse self today is just the best. And they're so excited about who they are and sharing it with their peers. And then from their peers' perspective, it's no longer this adult in front of them. It's their peers. It's those times where I think, whether I make a penny or not, we're making changes here. We're making a difference.
Alexa! Living room 65.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
What's wrong with the lights?
Nothing now. I fixed them because they were at 100% capacity, and so I have reduced them to 65% of their capacity.
I think a lot of people might not understand why you would need the lights dimmed.
Because when the lights are at full capacity, or if we have the overhead light on, for example, kind of feels like the light is penetrating my eyeballs into my soul. That is why. And therefore, if your soul is being penetrated, you cannot think.
That's
obviously.
Fair. What would you suggest for people who maybe want to have dimmer lights but don't want to tear apart their house to have dimmer switches?
You too can have dimmer lights that do not penetrate your soul. You just need to buy smart bulbs and then connect them to whatever device you use, and you can control it through the device. Another function that I use the smart bulbs for is if you walk in the house and it's nighttime and it's dark and scary, you can scream at your device, as I have demonstrated earlier, to turn on the lights for you so that you don't have to walk in the house and get kidnapped.
Tell me about the benefits of being able to tailor your environment to your sensory needs.
Yeah, like you can't control the outside environment, and I feel like that's where things are the most offensive. The lights are the brightest, the sounds are the loudest, but at home, it shouldn't be that way. At home kind of should be like your sanctuary away from all that, hence the lights dimming. If I could do that everywhere, that'd be great, but I can't, so I do it where I can because that's where I have control over it.
Friendly reminder that criticizing autistic people for being too sensitive is ableist. Many autistic people have hypersensitivity, which means we may react to things on a different level than most people do. So what others see as overreacting is really us just reacting. Being sensitive is not a bad thing, but putting others down for being sensitive is.
Tonight, it was just me and my oldest, he's 9, talking in the living room before bed. My middle's already asleep, and my youngest is with my husband. He's putting him to sleep, right? So it's just us. And so as he's getting up and he's going to bed, he turns back and looks at me and he's like, Mama, I just really enjoy talking to you. You understand me. It's because you're autistic and I'm autistic. When I tell you, wow, it's why I advocate so hard and so much for people to understand their brains, especially if you're a parent. When we understand ourselves, then we can help our children understand who they are. I felt alone as a child. I felt like nobody thought like me. Nobody felt the things that I felt. And truly, I didn't realize how much I needed that until I saw how much it has meant in my son to have it.
Got 3 looks, and that's it. Yeah.
Could I interest you in everything, all of the time? A little bit of everything, all of the time. Well, look who's inside again.
CEO, entrepreneur, born in 1964.
So Happy Hands is really just my youngest son's hand flapping stem that he's always used when he's really excited. That's why we call it Happy Hands. Because since the time he was itty bitty, if he got really excited about something, them little hands would just get to going. And even before he actually was diagnosed, we'd look at the Happy Hands and be like, yeah, there's that touch of the autism, but look how cute he is. Look at his little hands go. So me and my husband started calling it his Happy Hands. So from then on, every time he'd get overly excited and we knew he might break a rule because of how excited he was, we'd tell him to use his Happy Hands, like, hey bud, don't run, use your Happy Hands. Because contrary to what a lot of autistic people, mental health professionals included, used to think, stimming is really just another tool for these children to use in order to emotionally regulate. So instead of trying to discourage my kids from stimming or teach them to hide their stimming, I teach them to utilize their stimming as tools. When we're talking about kids on the autism spectrum and the big emotions that they feel that they struggle to regulate with, we got to look at it as if it's a pressure release valve. Think of a tea kettle that you put on the stove and it gets hot and then whistles. If that daggum part that whistles wasn't there, that shit would go boom. These autistic kids are just like that daggum tea kettle. You put energy in, energy's got to be able to come back out or it's going to go boom. And the last thing we want these kids to do is explode all the time. So we give them tools to be able to regulate and let some of that energy out. Preventing stimming is actually extremely cruel to the autistic child and the autistic adult. Because, like, imagine that you had all these big feels going on and you weren't allowed to get them out at all. Those feelings turn into energy and then it's bound up inside of you and it becomes physically painful. A lot of parents, they'll actually find if they allow their child to stim and they teach their child how to stim in correct ways that are not going to hurt them, they'll find that their child actually explodes less often. So if I'm dealing with a child that has a stim that is self-harming, like my oldest used to just beat the shit out of himself, and the youngest will do that too, and so will the middle one, I start handing out rubber bands. Like, here, put this on your wrist. You want to feel pain? Flick the shit out of yourself. They get the pain that they need in order to self-regulate those emotions, but I also get them to not leave bruises on themselves. It's a win-win and everybody in the situation's happy. These are primarily kids that they struggle to communicate, which also means to communicate their feelings and their emotions. So taking away that stem, you're legitimately taking away how they communicate their emotions. Because if you pay attention, most of these stems, they actually change from mood to mood with each kid. You'll be able to pinpoint what's their happy stems, what's their mad stems, what's their sad stems, what's their overwhelmed stems. And then you'll be able to utilize those as tools to help them regulate.
I was not aware, no one in my life was aware that I had autism when I was a child. But one of the ways that it really impacted me, I think the most, at least through school, was I was like terrified of participation. Like, y'all remember participation credit, right? That was my literal hell. That was my literal hell. I would have rather died on the spot than have to raise my hand in class and like talk in front of everyone. So there was one day, I was a junior in high school and I was in my AP biology class, and we were learning about some sort of biological process, and the teacher was trying to have us learn this like analogy with like your hand and a rubber band, so like you'd remember how the process worked. And so we all split up into groups and we practiced, and at the end he was like, okay, who wants to demonstrate to the class? Who wants to show everyone how this process works? And so a bunch of people raised their hand, and he kind of went, no. Actually, we're going to pick the people who never talk, who never raised their hand. Why he did this, I have no idea, because clearly if you're not talking in class, it means you're extremely uncomfortable, because me and the girl who never spoke in class, fantastic grades in that class. But anyway, he looked at me and this other girl, because we all fucking knew it, and he was like, I'm going to pick someone who never speaks. And it didn't help that my boyfriend at the time thought it was so funny when I got like really embarrassed and humiliated. So he was like pointing at me like, pick this person. And he asked me and he said, come on up. And I said, no. And he said, no, you're going to come up and do this. And I said, no, I don't feel comfortable. I don't want to do that. And he said, no, you have to come up if you want credit for this day. So I went up there. I cannot describe to you how humiliating this experience was. Like, I was head to toe, like trembling, shaking. I was on the verge of tears. I had to stand in front of all of my peers in this class and go over this process. And of course, you know, your mind goes completely blank. I did not have a single thought in my mind. I had no idea what I was doing. I just basically, on the verge of tears, made up this process to the best of my ability off the top of my head because my mind was blank. And I finished, and the teacher kind of looked at me, and he looked really shocked because I was a really smart kid. Like, but he was shocked that the kid who never wanted to talk in class was humiliated when they were forced to come in front of the class. Like, it never made any sense to me. And I think about that to this day. Listen to kids, if they don't want to go in front of the class, if they don't want to do participation credit, like, find something else for them to do, because it's extremely traumatizing when you try and force them to do it.
It's entirely possible that
Okay, so this is called hypermentalization, and I thought we could talk about hypermentalization with autism, because there's actually studies done about this that show that the more increase of hypermentalization that you have, the less actual social cognition that you have. So I have an autistic friend that I made on here, and we both do this to very extreme levels, but we talk about it very in depth with one another, and we'll go back and forth doing it to each other, trying to help each other figure things out that maybe we've missed the bigger picture on. Now, I would like to add in here that the more in depth that we are going and the more that we are trying to understand everything is very much a concrete picture of how much we are lacking that surface level social cognition, because we are trying to go so in depth because we don't understand. It's the same with the hypomentalization, also linked. It's very interesting.
As a little girl, she may know she's different, but not yet have the words to describe how or why. She may have a few close friends, or she may prefer to immerse herself within her interests for hours on end, collecting endless amounts of information. She might work hard to keep her composure at school and around friends and extended family, but when she finally returns to her safe space, she may melt down as a result of bottled up emotions accumulated throughout the day. The world around her can be too loud, too bright, and too smelly at times. She often finds herself confused and unable to accurately predict the actions and feelings of the people she's close to. At a young age, she learns to sit back and observe those around her. She carefully listens, watches, and learns to mimic the actions, intonations, and words of others. She quickly connects this mimicry with social acceptance from her peers, and because of this, she continues to perfect her craft. Throughout adolescence, she is more or less able to mask her social difficulties. Aside from the people closest to her, no one is fully aware how she struggles to cope with small changes, keep her body still and quiet, and control her emotions. As she grows, she may find that sometimes the demands of adult life exceed her current abilities. There are large gaps in her skill sets that weren't as apparent or as problematic in childhood. She now finds herself in situations that she'd never prepared or practiced for. Adulthood presents new challenges for which she does not always have the ability to mask her way through. But eventually, she learns the word for this is autism, and she finds the tools and support she needs to help her continue to thrive.
I met a little autistic girl online yesterday, and while I was trying to conduct the assessment, she asked what number when I was going through the PowerPoint. And I was like, what number? And she was like, what number? So I went back to the other one and I was like, we're on slide 5. And then her mom said, no, she means like, how many slides do you have? And I was like, oh, I was worried to tell her 40, but 40 sounds long, but some of them are just like quick, like where questions and not big, deep questions. So I said, you know, there are a few left. And she was like, how many? What number? So I just scrolled down to the bottom and I was like 40. She was like 80 and just joking around with me. And I could see that her mom was mortified that she asked this question. So after we finished the slides, we played like a little twister thing online. And I told her mother that it wasn't rude at all when she asked how many slides. That's a legitimate question. Like, how long is this going to be? And how many questions do you want me to answer? A lot of times we take things personally and we say like, don't say that, that's very rude. And we teach kids not to ask the question. But I know, especially with autistic kids, they're very direct and they just have like this itch that needs to be scratched. It's not them trying to hurt us or them trying to say this is boring, this is whatever. It's just a legitimate question. And when I answered the question, she didn't even say, oh my gosh, that's so long. She joked with me and said 80 instead of the 40. So her mother was like, wow, you really understand my daughter. And I was like, and you will understand her too. And it's going to be so much easier when you don't assume that she's being rude or hurtful, but that she's just asking genuine questions. It was lovely.
Autistic person look like?
Hi, hello, it's me. I literally make content because I was tired of not seeing non-traumatized autistics. I'm very blessed.
So this was my reaction. Getting to the end of the video. Because she exists. It's possible. I watched the video that she stitched weeks ago, and I thought to myself, yeah, ain't no fucking way that a not traumatized autistic person exists, and she's here to prove us wrong. I love her energy. I love her smile. I love how she stims. I love how unadulterated her joy is, how free she is to just enjoy being herself. And I'm making this video mostly to prove a point, because it's just so, like, I don't normally cry. In my videos, I don't normally cry in front of people, period. Hyper independent. Heavy masking. And every time somebody finds out that I'm autistic, they say, you don't look it, you don't act like it, knowing nothing about autism. And they say, well, you seem so well put together. And I'm like, yeah, it's on purpose. But this is how I feel on the inside every day. It was cute when I was a kid. It was cute the way I stepped and the way I sang and danced like my family. To this day will tell you, she literally never stopped singing, dancing, talking, telling stories, doing all kinds of strange stuff. And that was me stimming because I was happy. And then at some point it wasn't cute anymore. And I was constantly being told to grow up, act your age, be responsible. Everything in my reality, everything in my day-to-day life reinforced that I was inappropriate, that I was not acceptable. And people are so often shocked when the real me comes out, who's random and spazzy and silly and goofy and has all of these kind of hidden performative talents, and they never saw it coming. So I'm really grateful that this creator exists and she shows the world how she exists unapologetically, and I aspire to be like her one day.